Odinga, born January 7, 1945, is a Kenyan politician who served as Prime Minister of Kenya from 2008 to 2013, and has served as leader of the opposition since 2013. He was Member of Parliament, MP, for Langata from 1992 to 2013. He served in the Cabinet of Kenya as Minister of Energy from 2001 to 2002, and as Minister of Roads, Public Works and Housing from 2003 to 2005. Odinga was appointed High Representative for Infrastructure Development at the African Union Commission in 2018. Early life. Raila Odinga was born at the Anglican Church Missionary Society Hospital, in Maseno, Kisumu District, Nyanza Province on January 7, 1945 to Maria Juma Odinga and Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. His father served as the first Vice President of Kenya under President Jomo Kenyatta. He went to Kisumu Union Primary School, Miranda Primary and Miranda School where he dropped out in 1962. He spent the next 2 years at the Herder Institute, a part of the philological faculty at the University of Leipzig in East Germany. He received a scholarship that in 1965 sent him to the Technical School, Magdeburg, now a part of Otto von Guericke University Magdeburg, in the GDR. In 1970, he graduated with an MSc, Masters of Science. While studying in East Berlin during the Cold War, as a Kenyan he was able to visit West Berlin through the checkpoint Charlie. When visiting West Berlin, he used to smuggle goods not available in East Berlin and bring them to his friends in East Berlin. He returned to Kenya in 1970. In 1971 he established the Standard Processing Equipment Construction and Erection Limited, later renamed East African Spectre, a company manufacturing liquid petroleum gas cylinders. In 1974, he was appointed Group Standards Manager of the Kenya Bureau of Standards. In 1978 he was promoted to its Deputy Director, a post he held until his 1982 detention. Detention. In an era of unrelenting human rights abuse by the Kenya government, Raila was placed under house arrest for 7 months after evidence seemed to implicate him along with his late father Oginga Odinga for collaborating with the plotters of a failed coup attempt against President Daniel Arap Moi in 1982. Hundreds of Kenyan civilians and thousands of rebel soldiers died in the coup. Several foreigners also lost their lives. Raila was later charged with treason and detained without trial for 6 years. A biography released 14 years later in July 2006 apparently with Raila's approval, indicated that Raila was far more involved in the attempted coup than he had previously admitted. After its publication, some members of parliament in Kenya called for Raila to be arrested and charged, but the statute of limitations had already passed and, since the information was contained in the biography did not amount to an open confession on his part. Among some of his most painful experiences was when his mother died in 1984 but the prison wardens took 2 months to inform him of her death. Citation needed. He was released on February 6, 1988 only to be rearrested in September 1988 for his pro-democracy and human rights agitation at a time when the country continued to descend deep into the throes of poor governance. In the despotism of single-party rule, multi-party democracy Kenya was then, by law, a one-party state. His encounters with the authoritarian government generated an aura of intrigue about him and it was probably due to this his political followers, christened him Agwambo, Loa for the mystery or unpredictable, or Jikum, meaning chairman. Raila was released on June 12, 1989, only to be incarcerated again on July 5, 1990, together with Kenneth Matiba, and former Nairobi Mayor Charles Rubia, multi-party system and human rights crusaders. Raila was finally released on June 21, 1991, and in October, he fled the country to Norway amid indications that the increasingly corrupt Kenyan government was attempting to assassinate him without success. Multi-party politics. At the time of Raila's departure to Norway, the Forum for the Restoration of Democracy, FORD, a movement formed to agitate for the return of multi-party democracy to Kenya, was newly formed. In February 1992, Raila returned to join Ford, then led by his father Jaramogi Odinga. He was elected vice chairman of the General Purposes Committee of the party. In the months running up to the 1992 general election, Ford split into Ford Kenya, led by Raila's father Jaramogi Odinga, and Ford Asili led by Kenneth Matiba. Raila became Ford Kenya's deputy director of elections. Raila won the Langata constituency parliamentary seat, previously held by Philip Leakey of Kenya. Raila became the second father of multi-party democracy in Kenya after Kenneth Matiba. When Jaramogi Odinga died in January 1994, and Michael Wamalwakajana succeeded him as Ford Kenya chairman, Raila challenged him for the party leadership. The elections were marked by controversy, after which Raila resigned from Ford Kenya to join the National Development Party, NDP. In his first bid for the presidency in the 1997 general election, Raila finished third after President Moi, the incumbent, and Democratic Party candidate Mwai Kibaki. He however retained his position as the Langata MP. In a move that surprised many foe and friend alike, Raila decided to support Moi, his archenemy, even entering into a political merger between his party, NDP, and Moi's much-hated KANU party, which many Kenyans likened to the yoke of oppression. The new merger was called New KANU. Previous admirers of Raila now saw him as a sellout to a cause he had once championed by closing ranks with a despot. He accepted a position in Moi's cabinet as energy minister, serving from June 2001 to 2002, during Moi's final term. In the subsequent KANU elections held later that year, he was elected the party's Secretary General, replacing J.J. Komodo. It was apparent to many that Raila hoped to ascend to the presidency through KANU and with Moi's support. In 2002, much to the chagrin of Raila and many other hopefuls in the party, Daniel Arap Moi pulled a surprise by endorsing Uhuru Kenyatta, a son of Kenya's first president Jomo Kenyatta, to be his successor, a relatively newcomer in politics. Moi publicly asked Raila and others to support Uhuru as well. This was taken as an affront by many of the party loyalists, who felt they were being asked to make way for a newcomer who, unlike them, had done so little to build the party, given his recent entry. Raila and other KANU members, including Kalonzo Musyoka, George Saitoti and Joseph Komodo, opposed this step, arguing that the then 38-year-old Uhuru was politically inexperienced and lacked the leadership qualities needed to govern. Moi however stood his ground, maintaining that the country's leadership needed to pass to the younger generation. Dissent ran through the party, with some members openly disagreeing with Moi, an unthinkable thing to do, given Moi's reputation as an autocrat. It was then that the Rainbow Movement was founded, comprising disgruntled KANU members who exited KANU. The exodus, led by Raila, was so big, with most big names fleeing the party in droves. A hapless Moi was left with his hand-picked successor almost alone, with the party reduced to an empty shell boasting poor electoral prospects. The Rainbow Movement went on to join the Liberal Democratic Party, LDP, which later teamed up with opposition Mwai Kibaki's National Alliance Party of Kenya, NARC, a coalition of several other parties, to form the National Rainbow Coalition, NARC. Amid fears that this opposition super-alliance would fail to unite and rally behind a common candidate as in previous occasions, thus easily handing victory to the government, Raila, in a poignant moment, declared Kibaki Tasha, or Swahili for Kibaki is sufficient, an endorsement of a Kibaki ticket. This resolved the matter of candidacy, and NARC went on to defeat Moi's protege, Uhuru Kenyatta, in one of the most epic moments of Kenya's electoral history. Raila's led opposition won a landslide 67% of the vote, dealing a humiliating blow to Moi. One of the centerpieces of this historic campaign was that it was Raila who almost solely campaigned for Kibaki throughout the country, while Kibaki was bedridden and incapacitated following an accident in which he sustained injuries. Dissent from within. Raila with Gordon Brown at Kibra on assuming office, President Kibaki did not appoint Raila Odinga as Prime Minister in the new government, contrary to a pre-election. Kenya's constitution had no provision for Prime Minister yet, neither did he give LDP, Raila's faction, half of the cabinet positions as per them. He instead sought to entrench and increase his own NARC side in cabinet, even appointing MPs from the opposition parties, Kanu and Ford people, to the cabinet. The perceived betrayal started a simmering disquiet which in time led to an open rebellion and a split within the cabinet. A key point of disagreement was a proposed new constitution for the country, which was a major campaign issue that had united Kibaki's NARC and Odinga's LDP in the campaign. This constitution included provisions to trim presidential powers to rein in what was seen as an autocratic presidency, a feature of both the Mwa and First President Jomo Kenyatta's regimes, which had led to a lot of power abuse and an unaccountable leadership. Once in power, however, Kibaki's government instituted a constitutional committee which turned around and submitted a draft constitution that was perceived to consolidate presidential powers and weaken regional governments, contrary to the pre-election draft. Raila opposed this and went on to campaign with his LDP cabinet colleagues on the referendum no side, opposing the president and his lieutenants in a bruising countrywide campaign. When the document was put to a referendum on November 21, 2005, the government lost by a 57% to 43% margin. Embarrassingly for Kibaki, out of 8 provinces, only one, Central Province where his tribe the Kikuyu are dominant, voted yes for the document, isolating his own tribe from the rest of Kenya and exposing his campaign as ethnic-based. A shell-shocked and disappointed President Kibaki sacked the entire cabinet on November 23, 2005. When it was reconstituted 2 weeks later, Raila and the entire LDP group were left out. This led to the formation of a new opposition outfit, the Orange Democratic Movement, ODM, and orange was the symbol for the no vote in the constitutional referendum. In January 2006, Raila Odinga was reported to have told police that he believed his life was in danger, having received assassination threats. 2007 presidential election. On July 12, 2007, with Kibaki's re-election bid drawing close, Odinga alleged that the government was withholding identity cards from voters in opposition strongholds with intention to skew the election in favor of Kibaki. He also claimed that the intended creation of 30 new constituencies was a means by the government to fraudulently engineer victory in the December 2007 parliamentary election. In August 2007, the Raila's own Orange Democratic Movement Kenya suffered a setback when it split into two, with Odinga becoming head of the Orange Democratic Movement, ODM, while the other faction, the ODMK, was headed by Kalonzo Musyoka, who parted ways with Raila. On September 1, 2007, the ODM elected Odinga as its presidential candidate in a national delegates conference held at the Mwa International Sports Center in Nairobi. Odinga received 2,656 votes. The only other candidates who received significant numbers of votes were Musalia Mudavadi with 391 and William Ruto with 368. Earlier, Najib Balala had withdrawn his candidature and endorsed Raila. The defeated candidates expressed their support for Odinga afterward, and Mudavadi was named as his running mate. Odinga then launched his presidential campaign in Uhuru Park in Nairobi on October 6, 2007. Raila's bid for the presidency however failed when, after the 27th of December presidential election, the Electoral Commission declared Kibaki the winner on December 30, 2007, placing him ahead of Odinga by about 232,000 votes. Jeffrey Sachs, professor of economics and director of the Earth Institute at Columbia University, and special advisor to former UN Secretary General, faulted the United States' approach to the post-election crisis and recommended an independent recount of the vote. Raila and his ODM leaders rallied against the decision, with James Orengo and Professor Nyong'o calling for mass action. Later violence broke out in the country. The government's response was heavy-handed as it deployed police and paramilitary units to counter public protests. Following 2 months of unrest, which led to the death of about 1,000 people and displacement of about 250, a deal between Odinga and Kibaki, which provided for power sharing and the creation of the post of Prime Minister, was signed in February 2008. It was brokered by former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan. Odinga was sworn in as Prime Minister, along with the power-sharing cabinet, on April 17, 2008. The post of Prime Minister was last held by Jomo Kenyatta between 1963 and 1964 following independence. Odinga is thus the second person in Kenya's history to hold the position. 2013 presidential election. The next presidential election in which Raila was to run was the 2013 March poll, involving Kibaki's handover of power. Uncertainty loomed over Raila's main rivals, Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto, who had both been indicted by the ICC of The Hague for their alleged role in the 2007 election violence. Despite their pending case, the duo had been nominated by the Jubilee Party with Uhuru as presidential candidate and Ruto as running mate. Many felt they were unfit to run for office before clearing their names from such serious crimes, while others felt that their opponents were trying to unfairly exploit the situation by eliminating them from the race and pave the way for their easy victory. A Synovate survey released in October 2012 found Raila to enjoy a leading 45% approval rate against Uhuru and Ruto. Raila Odinga's party, Orange Democratic Movement, ODM, joined Kalonzo Musyoka's Wiper Party and Moses Wetangula's Ford Kenya, FK, in a coalition for Reforms and Democracy, for the presidential race with Raila as the presidential candidate and Kalonzo as his running mate to face Jubilee's coalition, Uhuru Kenyatta's, the National Alliance, TNA, William Ruto's, United Republican Party, URP, Charity Njelu's, National Rainbow Coalition, NARC, and Najib Balala's, Republican Congress, RC. A number of Western countries were not in favor of the Uhuru and Ruto candidacy in view of their pending ICC cases and association with crimes against humanity. Former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan voiced his reservations, as did former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs Johnny Carson, who cautioned against the election of Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto. He was notably quoted as saying that choices have consequences, referring to the fate of U.S.-Kenyan relations, with the Uhuru administration. Raila ran for president in the elections held on March 4, 2013 and garnered 5,340,546 votes, 43.70%, out of the 12,221,053 valid votes cast. The winner, Uhuru Kenyatta, garnered 6,173,433 votes, 50.51%. As this was above the 50% plus one vote threshold, Uhuru won it on the first round without requiring a runoff between the top two candidates. The Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, EBC, therefore officially declared Uhuru Kenyatta the president-elect on Saturday 9 March at 2:44 p.m. Uhuru was set to take office as Kenya's fourth president. However, Raila Odinga, in a press conference shortly after the results were announced, noted that the election had been marred by massive failures of the biometric voter registration (BVR) kits, EVID, electronic voter identification or PAL books, RTS, results transmission system or tallying system, and the RPS, results presentation or transmissions system. He claimed that the manual tallying was suspect, leaving him no choice but to the Kenya presidential election petition 2013 contest the result in Kenya's highest court, the Supreme Court. In anticipation of the legal challenge, Raila Odinga and his lawyers George Oro, Mutula Kilonzo, and James Orengo, secretly instructed Raj Palasana, a management consultant from Barcelona, to carry out a forensic investigation of the technology used in the Kenyan general election 2013, during which the EBC made claims on TV and media that there were technological challenges, that servers overloaded and that database crashed. Kenya's Chief Justice Dr. Willie Mutunga announced on Monday, 11 March, that the Supreme Court was fully formed and ready to deliver its judgments within 14 days as stipulated by the Constitution of Kenya. During the petition hearing, Chief Justice Willie Mutunga made a finding rejecting second affidavit of Raila Odinga, which comprised 900 pages, on the basis that it amounted to new evidence which is not permitted under the Constitution. Subsequently, the Supreme Court issued a ruling dismissing the petition on March 30, 2013. The Supreme Court, while declaring Uhuru the next president, also declared that the EP should not have included the invalid, spoiled votes in the calculation of the final figures and percentages. Chief Justice Willie Mutunga also directed that the EEC, Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, and the DPP, Director of Public Prosecutions, carry out a criminal investigation of the EP in relation to the BVR, EVID, RTS and RPS. After the Supreme Court dismissed his petition, Raila flew to South Africa to avoid attending the inauguration of Uhuru Kenyatta, held on April 9, 2013 at Mwa Sports Complex at Kasarani, Nairobi. The swearing ceremony marked the end of his premiership. In an important development, the full investigation findings were published as the OPCO report on the website www.kenyalegal.com and inspired the documentary 50+1, The Inside Story by KTN journalists John Nemu and Muhammad Ali. This documentary examines the history of election fraud and the history of corruption in the judiciary, and in which Raila Odinga claims that it cannot be ruled out that it was a deliberate act or omission by the court not to subject the technical evidence to scrutiny because the outcome would invalidate the entire election process and discredit the EP. – 2017 presidential elections. Claims of election rigging. Odinga, through his lawyer James Orengo, Oshindanalo and Clifford Ochieng, claimed that forces associated with his main competitor Uhuru Kenyatta had hacked into the EP, Kenya's electoral body, server and tampered with its database. He stated that the results that were being transmitted by EP were false because they had been manipulated via a computer algorithm designed to maintain an 11% gap between him and Uhuru's votes. As such, he proved the votes were not real votes cast by human voters but the outcome of a computer-generated formula producing artificial values. This intrusion into EP's system, he further said, affected not just the presidential results but the entire election, including the votes cast for MPs, senators, governors and women representatives. He called the alleged intrusion the biggest vote theft in Kenya's history. Later, while vote tallying was still in progress and the country was awaiting announcement of the final results, Raila revealed that his team had received information from a confidential source in EPC indicating that results from its server showed him leading with an unassailable 8 million votes over Uhuru's 7 million votes. Based on this, he demanded he be declared the 5th president of Kenya. The EP, however, rejected Raila's contention, saying the winner could not be announced before the tallying was complete, and also being an independent body it could not be compelled by one of the candidates to announce the results. The EP finally announced the results, declaring Uhuru the winner with 8.2 million votes against Raila's 6.7 million. The results showed massive losses for NASA, with Jubilee invading traditional NASA strongholds. NASA refused to recognize the results. Shortly after Uhuru's declared victory, violence was reported in some parts of the country which are opposition strongholds. However, the violence was not of the scale witnessed in the 2007 election aftermath and broke out only sporadically. Both Odinga and President Kenyatta called for public calm. Annulment of the presidential election. After initially declining to take his case to court on the grounds that the court had previously made an unfavorable judgment against him, Raila reconsidered and lodged a petition. After 2 days of hearing, the judges in a majority 4-2 decision returned a verdict on 1st of September annulling the presidential results and ordered a new election to be held within 60 days. The court decision, read by Chief Justice David Maraga and widely viewed as unprecedented both in Africa and globally, held that the EP failed to conduct the election in the manner provided by the Constitution and so could not stand. Despite the Supreme Court ruling, Odinga announced his withdrawal from the presidential election, scheduled for 26th of October, on 10th of October. The reason for his withdrawal was his belief that the election would again not be free or fair, since no electoral process reforms had been made since the annulment of the last election, as well as various defections which occurred from his coalition. It later stated that he, Raila Odinga, had not officially withdrawn from the race for presidency, and his would still appear on the ballot on 26 October among other candidates who contested in the 8 August general elections. This resulted to violent uproar in various parts of the country some few days before and after the repeat polls, especially in the NASA-dominated zones. Alleged police brutality was reported as Independent Medical Research Organization, IMLU, cited 39 deaths and high assault cases. Swearing in of People's President, and reconciliation. On 30th January, Raila Odinga staged a swearing-in ceremony in Nairobi where he named himself People's President. Following this ceremony, TV stations across Kenya were taken off air. A month and a half later, on 9th March, Raila Odinga and President Uhuru Kenyatta made a joint televised appearance in which they referred to each other as brothers, and agreed to put aside political differences to allow Kenya to move forward. Personal life. Baptized as an Anglican Christian in the Church Missionary Society, CMS, in his childhood, Odinga later became a born-again Christian and is a communicant member of All Saints Cathedral in Nairobi. Odinga is married to Ida Odinga, Ida Inangu. They live in Karen, Nairobi and have a second home at Central Farm, in Siaya County. The couple have 4 children: Fidel, 1973 to 2015, Rosemary, born 1977, Raila Jr., born 1979, and Winnie, born 1990. Fidel was named after Fidel Castro and Winnie after Winnie Mandela. Winnie is currently studying Communication and International Area Studies as a double major student at Drexel University in Philadelphia. In an interview with BBC News in January 2008, Odinga asserted that he was the first cousin of US President Barack Obama through Obama's father. However, Barack Obama's paternal uncle denied any direct relation to Odinga, stating Odinga's mother came from this area, so it is normal for us to talk about cousins. But he is not a blood relative. Odinga briefly played soccer for Owo Union, now Gor Mahia, as a midfielder. Odinga was appointed by the African Union to mediate the 2010 to 2011 Ivorian crisis, which involved Alassane Ouattara and Laurent Gbagbo. Raila wrote Flame of Freedom, a 1,040-page autobiography which talks about his life from childhood. It was launched on October 6, 2013 in Kenya and subsequently in the United States on October 15, 2013. He was accompanied by a section of Kenyan county governors.